Okay, we're getting all set up today. What's up? Yeah, bring out the fan.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, have your fan. Do you guys have the little foam pad things for your fans? Here's some. You're going to need to put these little carbon filters into your fans. That'll hopefully take the lead out of the air.
Okay.
There's one for you. One for you.
Absorber.
Yes.
Yes.
One for you. And the rest of you will die of cancer.
Mine already has the filter.
Nice.
Right. Okay.
So we just have Danielle that we're waiting on. Anyway, so today it's going to be still as manic as usual, but we're going to be a bit more focused on one task. We're going to try to teach you guys how to solder, lay out your whole lightning bug thing. Beautiful. And hopefully get those things going and programming.
I have an extra.
Oh, an extra solder wick? Cool. Find someone who does not have an extra one of those. Our ambient video today was selected by Alex. And we have, this was when I was in Panama. People were doing an experiment with these bats, and now they're just trying to wrangle the bat back into the net. And so there's about 5 minutes of just these two guys at about 3 in the morning just trying their best to capture this bat flying around. So it will let you understand that animals can be difficult to work with, even in the simplest of interactions of, I want you to be in this cage now. So let it absorb into you. Hello, Danielle. Cool. So the first thing everyone needs to do, get station set up, share a station with a buddy, start laying your copper tape onto your design, and hook up power to your stations. Okay? And then let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, you just lay copper tape out right on that. Huh? Yeah. And you can see I have that example one laying up somewhere.
So when I look at the conversation, sometimes it looks like there's two little pegs.
Yeah, exactly. So it can only be touching, each copper tape thing can only be touching one little leg. So what you might need to do is take your X-Acto knife and like slice it to make it thinner.
Besides, I like this knife more.
Eric, may I share a station?
Yes. As long as I can find.
Also, I don't
Ready?
have a fan for this one.
Oh, the soldering iron.
This is not going to work very well.
That
we
is
need
a soldering iron.
How did you cut it? With my fingers.
It's not your drawers, right?
Yeah.
The bottom row is
Okay. Somebody probably has two. Does anyone have an extra soldering iron?
Yeah, I need a fan. Oh,
Yeah, that's what all the stuff that we want. Ooh, this station has hot biscuit. And a bunch of shrimps.
Since all the lamps right now are just kind of in the way, because we don't have light bulbs, let's just set them all on the sill.
Does everybody have a roll of hot tape?
You just rip it off.
Cake.
Soldering cancer-free all day. This is gonna be great.
I'm sharing it here.
Okay.
Soldering.
You could too.
everybody, we have one of these cool, stylish blue things. This cool, stylish blue thing tries to make your soldering iron heat up to a very specific point. The goal of melting solder, do we have solder around? We have some somewhere. Sorry.
Oh, you're okay. I thought I was
Solder looks like, I don't think it came in your stuff. I think I just steal it from
here's a roll, right?
No, that's a solder wick. They look like just these rolls of silver tube. Maybe it's over my I'll go and grab it in a second. What you need to know now is this blue thing right next to it. You're going to want a little thing to hang your soldering iron in. So this thing's going to get really hot. It'll melt through your skin, and it'll also melt metal. That's its goal. So we want a nice thing that when we're done soldering, we can set it in, and it won't catch the room on fire. So that's what this thing is right here, okay? This thing goes like this, into here, plop, plop. You just kind of squeeze it in, and then it'll stick there, and have this nice little thingamabob.
Yeah. So each of these little arms are like cut this.
Exactly. They need to be isolated.
Okay.
And you need to make sure that each one of those lines is going to the correct little foot too.
Okay.
So this top line actually goes back second from the top line. And this bottom one I think is ground, right? So it goes to the bottom.
Okay.
But anyway, once you get that little stand set up, then you take your soldering iron.
Did we find another one?
No, I'm still hunting. Okay. You take your little soldering iron, you plug it into the matching port over here. Da-da-da. And then you will hang it up in here and then turn it on. So now this thing's going to get hot. Don't start jabbing your tongue in through this thing because you'll burn your tongue. On top of probably other reasons. So just be careful with that. But they take a while to heat up, so that's why I'm saying try to get them going as soon as you can. So give it a soldering iron. Give it a soldering iron. You guys, here's your soldering iron. Two of you, that makes me think you may have two. I'm going to take your lamp out.
Yeah. You can see it in my hardship if you want.
Nice. Yeah, those are necessary. You want a little sponge thing. You get one of these. Maybe on top of the one side.
Yeah, I have a star and I
I'll shove it down further. You have an extra solder now?
have just another like portal.
Ah, okay. Look at all your drawers, too. Ah, this is what solder looks like.
Yeah, we have some of that stuff.
Oh, it came in the kit? No, see, that's a solder wick. So don't confuse this thing, which is your solder wick, for this roll of metal right here, okay? That's a little bit different. I'll explain what the solder wick is later. Yep. Eric, I think we're going to confiscate your stand. We might have you work with Kurt to find the hole in the soldering kit. Oh, you do? Okay.
I should work with
Yeah.
14.
We'll have you double up. Anyway, I'm going to take this, and you and Danielle double up with other people while I hunt down some soldering. Okay. Awesome. And taking the lamp.
Yeah, so I can
Are we being outsourced?
Yeah, we have to go elsewhere.
Should we solder this thing out there?
Yes, you should.
So I think that's
Yep, exactly. Yep. Each one of your strips should be touching just one leg on your cradle. Okay? Yeah, you might want to cut them to make them thinner if they're overlapping or touching, because otherwise they're going to short. That'll be probably the absolute hardest part about this entire thing, getting those lined up. So you guys need another blue base. What I'm going to do, you guys are going to have Eric. There we go. Distributing the parts. Here you go. Now you got a blue base. Hook it all up and start your soldering iron. Heating up. And I'll be right back. I'm going to hunt down extra parts we may be missing. And hold your questions. Don't do anything drastic until I'm back.
Got it. I guess I should wait to start so I get back. Should I got
Probably.
I don't know, we free. Yeah, I scared the hell out of myself this day when I turned 22. But I looked at the thing and it said August 25th, homework 1. I'm like, it's not August 25th anymore. What?
That's the date that they said, right? That's the date that it's
I did that twice and I had the same problem with another class. Oh, this is hard.
Yeah, like a little bit at the top right there.
Yeah.
Alright. Well. Got more hot sticks. Come at Boom, boom, boom. Cool.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
So if you look carefully at your schematic, you guys, can I borrow your schematic? If you look carefully at your schematic, your AT Tiny is an 8-pin dip chip. That's what they call it, dip. Dip stands for dual inline pin. So that's 4 on one side, 4 on the other side. So there's 8 pins total. In general, a lot of chips follow this convention of the upper right-hand corner is your voltage in that turns the chip on. And then the bottom left-hand corner is your ground. Then the only other parts that we want are on the very left side, you want the second pin from the top. Make sure not to use the first pin from the top, you want the second pin. And then on the right side, you want the very bottom right pin, which is labeled as pin 0 in your program. Oh, that looks gorgeous. Perfect. Nice. You are almost ready to start soldering.
I think I am too.
Cool. So, give me 1 second and then I'll jump on a soldering tutorial.
I'm not there, so we're going away.
And
be your whole animal interaction.
Yeah.
How you doing, Danielle?
Hello, how are you?
I'm terrific.
Oh,
Cool.
I'm
Very
doing
good.
very good.
Ooh, extra thin. Starting thin from the get-go. Nice.
But should I hop on now?
Yeah, in a second we're going to have a little soldering tutorial. Just checking in on everyone. You guys are pretty much ready. Looks like we're going to be soldering soon. This is going to be great. You guys are super fast. Did everyone read the readings? Readings, cool.
I've been reading one like 6 times.
I bet, right? Yeah, how often do you guys read those?
Like almost every class.
I think I'm actually in that book somewhere. Inventing the medium.
The bees are really interesting.
Yeah, the wasp.
Right? So that book, Curious Naturalist, is about my favorite book. It kind of sets up the foundations of my entire PhD thesis. Because he talks a lot about how there's a lot that can be gained from all the other aspects of your research when you're wandering around out in the field and just kind of observing and letting kind of natural systems flow over you. And that's also just as valuable as doing very rigorous experimentation in a lab. He also stresses the value of observing your creatures in their natural environment. What are some, so everyone boots the Nico Tinbergen reading into your mind. So it's just sitting up there. We're not going to talk about it right now. Just boot it up there. I'm going to teach you some soldering, and then as we're all kind of sitting around soldering, we're going to kind of discuss some aspects about it. So such as maybe what's the value of looking at things in their own environment versus what are the values of looking at things in a more artificial, man-made environment, like a lab or something like that. So we'll think about some of those things. But first, soldering. Everybody want to learn how to master metal and melt it and make it go to your limbs? Cool. So what we're going to do is, so if everybody can gather around here. Can that sit on there? Let's push them together.
Yeah, I forgot I only have one in the box. I need another one.
These shelves look super awesome when you first bought them. And they're not terrible, but some of them are just so junkier than others. They are small. So, do you mind if I use yours as an example?
No, it's not
A
mine.
couple example solders.
That is the IT.
Oh, no.
I can put it back where it was.
Nice.
Where's the cradle?
Oh, maybe.
What's that?
I need a cradle.
You need a cradle?
I need a cradle.
There's an extra cradle sitting right there.
That's the extra cradle?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so everybody, if you can, gather around. I'm going to turn on the light. You'll find, as we work with smaller and smaller things, how little light you normally get inside interior environments. We'll need to have some sort of, there, that's good enough for now. Okay, cool. So, here's your soldering iron. The goal of solder, are you planning on cutting out this? Yeah. Okay, cool. So you don't mind when the parts over here are ugly? Great. So, if you have a soldering iron, a lot of soldering irons will plug directly into a wall. All they basically do is turn electricity into heat. So this part gets hot. What part don't you touch with your tongue? That part, exactly, perfect. So when you're done with it, it sits here. You don't just set it down like anywhere else because it will burn and light things on fire. The lamps will be in handy later, especially once we have light bulbs. So, this thing wants to heat this up to a very specific temperature. That's because solder will melt at a certain temperature, But if it gets really hot, it's going to start combining with oxygen in the air. So it's super fun. It's like all the fun of playing with mercury without all of the going crazy and dying. So you see right now, before it was very silvery, right? Now it's turning kind of brown and it's dull. It's not as shiny anymore. That's it kind of oxidizing. Now oxidizing, the whole point of solder is to make very conductive connections between metal parts, right? So these things are all metal. It's just like having wire that happens to stick to your paper that you can lay out very easily. The whole point of soldering things is to make really good connections between stuff. If the solder gets too hot and gross, then it oxidizes and it actually becomes somewhat more resistant. So it doesn't work as well. You'll notice this less in your electrical connections you make, and more in as you solder. This tip is going to get filthy and gross, and it's going to be harder. You're going to be like just poking this, and it's not going to melt. And that's because you have all this oxidation buildup. How do you get rid of the oxidation? Does anybody have any water? I have a water bottle. Yes, that was me. Perfect, right over there. If somebody can grab that water bottle for me. There's two ways to clean off your tip. One is this weird gold sponge. Gold sponge seems pretty cool. You see how my tip turned all pretty and nice and silvery now? Silver means it's going to melt stuff like crazy. It's going to be super easy to work with. Beautiful. Oh, it's so great. And you just clean it up with a little gold sponge. Some people like that. Other people use, this is the more traditional thing, wet sponge. You can use wet or gold. So you pour a little bit of water onto this thing, and then you kind of drag this around. I'm not 100% sure which I like better. This gives a nice sound. This thing's easier if you don't have water. If it gets really bad, what I do is I take sandpaper and I just sandpaper it off till it's nice and shiny. Cool. So now, what do we need to do? We need to make this thing become metal bonded to these little metal strips we're laying down. How are we going to do that? So we're going to set this thing wherever we want. What we're going to do then is you're going to take your soldering iron, you're going to touch it to this metal here, then you're going to touch the solder onto your tip, and let it start touching the solder wire. Okay? We're just feeding it to a nice little puddle. Then when we pull it up, you'll see that now, and blowing on it makes it freeze up really quickly. It becomes kind of an actual very useful tool, because sometimes you'll be melting it and it's real puddly, and then when you pull the stick away, it'll bump your thing and your thing will move away. But if you blow on it, as you pull away, it'll kind of freeze it, and so it'll kind of hold things in place for you better. So now, you see, look at that, it's stuck in place. It's great. We made metal stick to other metal. It's awesome. One thing you're going to want to do is you have lots of these little connections around here, like this piece of tape stuck to this piece of tape. Those may look like good connections, but they're not actually the best connection. And sometimes the adhesive can actually act as a resistance. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to solder your cradle to all of those leads. You're also going to want to solder all of the places where you have cuts. You're going to want to solder them together. And the way that you do that is pretty easy too. You find the piece of tape that's on the bottom, because the solder will tend to jump upwards more easily than it will downwards. You'll hold your stick right there. You'll start feeding it the solder, make a nice little puddle. And then make sure that puddle gets all the way up to the top layer. Pull it off. And you have your nice little puddle. It's great. You'll notice while you're soldering that you see how this is a little like rounded ball, and that is like a flattened out puddle. Sometimes while you're soldering, solder over here, you'll get, that one, the soldering iron is really good. If you have a crappier soldering iron, sometimes you'll see, if you look at the very edges of this puddle of solder, they kind of go flat and meet with the metal. Sometimes they'll go, the puddle will go like this and come to like a sharp indent, as if like this. That means it's not actually connected. It may be even sticking, but it won't actually be connected. And so the cure for that is just you just hold your soldering iron there a little bit longer, and you'll see it bubble up and then turn flat. And that's how you know you'll have like a good solder joint. So does that seem pretty good? And any other questions? Yes, totally. I was just about to grab that out. Great. So everybody, start some soldering.
Let's do it.
Sure.
No, you should do
No, everybody has to do every part, okay?
I have a question about mine.
Yeah.
I didn't leave like a hole down here.
Yes.
And I also
Oh, okay, so you probably just want to chop it apart. And so you see the way it works is, for a battery, we're going to put the battery in there, and put one piece on top, and then the bottom of the battery will stick there, and then we clamp the whole thing down with a little binder.
Okay. So the circle battery.
Yeah, totally. Yep, just cut it, pull up one of the flashes. And yes, in this class, what's that?
We don't have any solder.
If you don't have any solder, you go up to your neighbors and you go, can I borrow your solder real quick?
Yeah.
Perfect. You go up, you take your solder. So we're supposed to have lead-free solder in here. This is regular solder, hence the fans. So wash your hands, again, wash your hands. You can take the solder and just kind of twist it. It's a very soft metal. Pulls off. Now you got a big hunk of solder. You guys need some solder too?
Yes, yes.
You guys have a whole roll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there.
I mean, not.
You need some solder in here?
I'm gonna hop on to a station.
Okay, cool.
Hey, come to our station.
Beautiful. I made your thing really long.
Do we have any scrap cardboard or anything we can like practice on, or should we just go?
Just go for it. This whole assignment is your practice first project.
You want to try? Yeah.
So you're going to fail a lot. Don't worry. You're going to fail a lot in this class.
Should not touch him.
Could you check really quick? These do not connect to this one.
They should not. Perfect.
This is okay as one thing.
Actually, it's not.
Okay.
I touched
So if you
it
look-
to like this.
There's like a battery there or something.
Yeah, an important design thing that everyone should take note of is the way that the thing gets powered is that you have one of your leads at the very bottom flips up, and you set your battery on top of this one, then fold this down on top of your battery, and then use a binder clip to snap them in place. So the very bottom shouldn't be completely touching. Perfect. That's perfect. You should all have a binder clip
It's
too.
not really that
I like it. Yeah.
Exactly. You do. You do. You need a binder clip, right? That's going to be what holds your battery on at the very end. So I'm just giving out supplies for you guys. There's one
Thank you.
for her.
Larry, you got the
In my ball.
I should chill until you're done. Okay, I can
Binder
answer.
clip for you.
You can go say hello. You just don't go to
Should
the
I
people
solder
with lead on their
anything?
head.
Some of mine have a couple little dents in it, but
The dents should be fine. And I'll actually show you
I think.
real quick.
I'm not.
If you can, once Eric has a break, I want you to pull out the multimeter that's in your shelves. They're over here actually. Oh, sorry, Eric.
You're good.
oh
I think we need a little bit of water. I think it's starting to get.
Oh, perfect.
Our
Yeah, you want a sponge?
Sure, that makes noise.
Yeah.
second one is.
Good feedback. So I'm going to teach you something real quick,
okay,
and you're eventually going to teach everyone else.
okay.
You see this thing? It's totally crazy. What's all this stuff? You spin this knob, it does all kinds of stuff. Nobody
I
can
like
do
the
it.
noise.
It does make a good noise. And check this out. Actually, it was good noise. Sure, there. So, all you need to know about this thing right now is is my shit good or not? So you just switch this little thing that's got a little beep sound.
Okay.
Then you go like, oh, is this thing's all crinkled right here, right? Does that mean I'm gonna
Are you
connect
so we're
here
supposed to do
to
all
here,
the-
or is it gonna be broken?
Yeah, all the joints
So
are
you just
cut.
touch one side to one side. Oh, and if it beeps, your shit's good. If it, so example, does the electricity go from here and then jump in the middle of the cardboard here?
Okay.
No, it doesn't. Shit's bad. So let's see if this actually works. So you see how this one's not taped right there? Because it's not supposed to be actually, right?
Yeah.
So that's good for us.
Okay. So this is that's it.
Exactly. So you'll just test your whole circuit. We'll eventually test it when we have the cradle on too to make sure it's good. So that's your new goal. You have to teach everyone the shit's good or not detector. How you doing? Awesome. You know what? All these people, they're all doubled up. You just want to like start rocking your own? You got your whole
You
own.
can do it. I learned it. I couldn't get it.
I am also patient. I can wait.
I'm not.
Cool.
I'm not
I'm
gonna
in.
make
It's
such
just so
a
good. Let's see.
Let's get
Okay.
some power.
So you have to go to this button right here.
I guess where we were with,
Okay.
with Eric, it was kind of already plugged up.
And put it on.
Oh, that's true.
So I might, could we do that or is this better?
And then
Well, this one's pretty close.
Okay.
Give me 1 second, I have like one more connection.
Alright. It's okay.
Yeah, this one's not actually as set up as you might think.
You are allowed to do your project.
Actually, I think I'm done.
Okay, that's all.
Should be making an engine.
Yeah, if you're not done, you're not, you can always go back.
Oh, like this part,
Alright,
that one, that one, that one.
so, start.
Yeah, we're all okay.
Just like
Bring
where you
down
bring
here.
it.
To cascade these powers.
Should I use that? I got
Are you
this
sure
one.
we shouldn't, but we're gonna.
I'm the best electronics teacher. Put that on. Should be all set up. This is gonna heat up. It's pretty new, so that should probably heat up.
If you said
rather
that,
quickly.
start down
And
there.
then
Hold the wire.
bring it in there.
You know, just like.
Oh yeah. Gold sponge is pretty cool.
So you can also just like hold down
There you
Oh, here we
go.
go.
iron lines.
You know what?
You want me to help hold?
I'm worried about getting
How's it going?
Good, these work.
Oh man. So Eric here was just like, oh, I wish I had hands that weren't my hands, but were instead cold metallic robot hands that could hold anything that they want in the world. These were his exact words. And then I was going to say to Eric, well, you do. In one of your friends, you guys are going to make great friends with a guy named Mr. Hands. So this is Mr. Hands here. He, or Mrs. Hands, in case you got the lady model, should not fall apart like that. Mr. Hands has these cold metallic robot hands of death. But they will bring you life if you use them correctly. What you can do with them is, usually when you're soldering, you'll be soldering two wires together. You'll put one wire in this side and one wire on the other side, clamp them, hold them together, and then all you have to do is just take your soldering iron and go bloop, and then it sticks them together without you having to burn your poor human hands. This can also be useful for holding down certain things. Mr. Hands goes, yo dude, I got your back. And then he just holds it right there for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Hand.
Great.
Okay.
Is this, I mean, these are like
That looks close, but not
I
touching.
bet you can push down on it.
No, really close but not touching works in electricity.
Oh,
Yeah, we're good. Perfect. And you know what's the way to check?
The little
Is-
beeper.
Yeah, you have a friend who's going to teach you all
I'll
about
put
it.
you. Bring it over. Okay. So, what do you do?
How things going?
this thingy is.
I think you turned it off. I turned it on for you really quick. That's the problem with the instructor getting too involved and doing too many things.
Okay, cool. And then I'm just gonna wait. What's a good way to test if it's hot enough besides just melting this?
Just melt a bit of solder.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll do that. Also, one last thing. Not just north.
Notch is north. Yep. It's a good mnemonic. The notch.
It's holding longer.
Notches north.
Notches north.
Mixed video games.
Only one.
Well, he's different than another one.
So the other one is not. Yeah.
Well, he's just done with it.
And melted the plastic.
But it's
Andy?
Yeah, what up?
I melted some of the plastic in my cradle.
Oh yeah, that's bad. So, yeah, you'll notice your soldering iron can melt through not only metal, but also plastic. It's not really gonna hurt anything on your cradle unless I had one person over the summer just totally obliterate their cradle. And they're just like, blah. I'm like, how did you even do this? But, so, in general, like little dabs like that aren't gonna be bad for your cradle,
Okay.
but it's gonna screw up your soldering iron and leave a plasticky, horrible smelling residue on it. So just try to be, yeah, exactly. Try to wipe it off. And just try to stay far away.
Gotcha.
Remember that not only does electricity conduct through metal, heat conducts through just as well. So you don't always have to get your soldering iron right to where you need the solder to go. You can just hold your soldering iron on the piece of metal nearby and then put the solder onto it, and it should melt. Need garbage bin?
Sometimes it's like kind of like cracky.
Chances are it was more about you wiggling your hands than that thing. So did you check, hold like one in each of the pins?
No,
So this will be the ultimate test. If you just hold this, because this is where your chip's actually going to plug in. So if you want to make sure that that pin right there goes all the way down to here. So that's the place you should be checking through once you got it all soldered up.
I'll stop soldering.
So everyone's pretty under control, right?
Nothing's on fire yet.
We're just kind of chugging along. So let's all, while we're doing this, somebody tell me something that you think is a pro of playing with an animal in the field versus like in the lab. Yeah, in their natural habitat.
They'll probably act in a more natural way, which their habitat, not like environment that they're not used to.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, that's a good point. There's so in the field of ethology, everybody remember what ethology means?
Working with animals in their natural environment.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the more frontwards way of describing it. But Larry took it from the back. That was too. Yeah. So there's kind of three main guys who founded ethology back in the 30s and 50s. One of them is my favorite, Nico Tinbergen, who you just read an awesome article about. What were the creatures?
The honeybee killers.
Yeah. Philanthus wasp, I think, right? Yeah. They go around, they hunt the bees, they jab them, and then bring them back to their nest and eat their young. The other two are a guy named Konrad Lorenz, who you may notice we have a millipede named after him. Konrad Lorenz was another big advocate of studying animals in their natural environment because he had an argument that not only will they behave possibly more naturally, but that you won't be able to see the full expression of their behaviors unless they are kind of relaxed and in the place where they're normal and they're used to, and that they're accustomed. They basically evolved to meet different aspects of the environment. Yeah, exactly. Their own ecological niche, whatever. So who can, debating on the other side, what's something good about laboratories? If we're only going to see the best parts of behavior in their natural environment, why do we have labs over here where we bring ants and millipedes and fish, and tigers and monkeys? Why do we bring them into labs?
Control, so we can see results over and over, see if they can be repeated.
Yeah, seeing whether it actually picks up and changes the variable, instead of like an actual object. And
Okay, how do you do
you can't really control the variable.
Okay, so it's an issue of control. What kind of things would we maybe want to control in the habitat?
This time?
Where they
or
can
in the
move.
middle of what?
We didn't do
Okay.
I don't have
Why do you want to control where they can
Well,
move?
like if you're studying sharks, they could go from like Alaska to
I would
South
probably put this
America.
down first.
So if you're not studying a specific area,
I'm worried that it might be too
it would
close.
suck.
Cool, yeah. I mean, so first of all, it can just make things more manageable. If you're studying your sharks and you just want to see your sharks turn blue when I feed them X chemical,
But do you put that metal
you maybe don't want to have to chase them all the way down from Alaska to New Mexico or wherever they range from. Yeah, exactly. What's another reason we might want to control where they can go?
Like the scientists comfortable?
What's that?
The
I just
scientists
bring
more
it on top
comfortable?
of here.
Human is more comfortable?
Yeah, exactly. So another just like logistics thing. If you are going to be pursuing the more empirical side of the scientific method and you want to rigorously deploy hundreds and hundreds of experiments, it can be very hard to go out and chase your animals around for all these things. You maybe want to just sit in a nice air-conditioned place, press a big button that says run experiments, and then just watch what all your animals do all at once.
That would affect the like the neutral patterns if you control them, like you get restless or tired.
Yeah, so you could be, in terms of controlling their movement, you could be restricting them to only going certain ways to see if this adds stress to them, to see if a change in where they can move, if it creates a lacking in their environment, or a super stimulus where suddenly you have them constrained to a certain area, and then you allow them to go anywhere you want. Maybe they will react in an exceptional way, where it's an even larger range than their normal habitat. Oh, in terms of the scientists just being comfortable, there's other reasons for studying animals in the lab in terms of just safety, especially when you deal with larger animals. There's some problems with people who study apes, where sometimes the females will be in heat and ready for mating, and their male scientists, the female apes may develop an attraction. That's really
That's
happens.
weird.
It's totally weird. And there's some scientists who's like, they've been doing all their research, and then suddenly like their lady ape develops like a crush, and it like screws up their results. Because like she just broods and she like won't do anything until like the one male scientist is there, and she's like, oh, but then she doesn't do her normal behavior. So there's like weird things that can happen like that. But of course, I guess so that can happen in the field too. And then if you're dealing with a huge, gorilla or something, it could be actually quite dangerous for the researcher. What about, so people were talking about control. In the laboratory, you have lots of control, right? What about an argument, so Tinbergen kind of argues back that, so let's say you're bringing Maddie into your sterile white room. She's used to roaming around in the fields of people, her natural environment, and licking all the cheeks she can. But now we have her in a sterile white room, and we have an artificial robot cheek. That's the only thing she can lick on. But so we're controlling our environment to test the licking abilities of Maddie here. Nico Tinbergen might argue there's kind of a dual argument. So we've reduced other factors. Maybe we want to study her in the wild, roaming across campus, and she licks different people's cheeks. There may be all kinds of factors that we're not able to control, right? Maybe like cheek salinity, or male cheeks versus female cheeks, all kinds of different things. But Tinbergen has a counter argument that when we put something into kind of a foreign environment, we're introducing all kinds of uncontrolled variables that we may not even be cognizant of. Maybe the magnetic pole in Maddie's normal environment in the middle of the quad is very specific, and that generations of Maddiosauruses have grown up there, and they've developed some sort of ecological tuning to this specific environment. And we bring her up here, and we think that we're doing the exact same experiment just with more control, but we're actually introducing all these different variables, like the magnetic flux in this building may be way different. There may be a office right next to us that does X-ray testing, and it's shooting things through, and all kinds of things that we're unable to account for. And so that's kind of another counter argument for doing stuff in the wild versus in the lab. What about 2 more reasons why you might want to do something in the field, and then 2 more why you might want to do something in the lab? We'll just shotgun these, and then we'll go on to the next part.
The field, you can see how it interacts with other living beings.
Oh, nice. Exactly. So, every creature, so us being humans especially, we tend to see living things as singular objects. I can take an Eric and I can pick him up, I can put him in a box, and I can send him to the South Pole, and he'll still be an Eric. But in a more ecological view of nature, we're all less singular entities and more of these continuous appendages of this mold-like growth that just happens to be all over the world, these little bits of stuff that are self-sustaining. We're way less individual beetles crawling around dirt, and more so like piles of ants or the cells that make up our entire body, which have less of a unique identity themselves and contribute to some sort of larger system. So if we wanted to study the behavior of one of my red blood cells, and we go like, oh, well, I don't want to, it's hard to see inside of Andy. I'm just going to take it and put it over in this bucket. We're not going to be able to see how these cells may interact with the other blood cells in my body, or how Maddie may react with the different types of grass and mushrooms that are growing out in her natural environment, the quad. I've made a whole mythos about your dog. So that's a very good thing. And there's a lot of animals that we talk about them being in symbiosis. You guys all know symbiosis, two animals kind of living together. One of the most famous symbiosis for me, so not famous at all, just one that I encounter a lot, is my friend Peter Martin, who on our class poster, you see me and him sitting on top of a truck in the jungle. He studies these ants that live in cecropia trees. So cecropia trees are basically these bamboo-like trees with these big leaves. The ants live inside of the hollow chambers of bamboo. Why do you think a tree would want ants to live inside of it? Exactly. So if you're a tree in the jungle, there's lots of stuff that's attacking you. There's sloths walking around, eating leaves. There's leafcutter ants. You all have seen like videos of leafcutter ants running around before, right? You should have, because I showed one in class the other day. So those little guys don't just carry Andy name tags. They go up to trees and they bite off chunks of their leaves and then carry them away. If you're a plant and you happen to be, through some minor mutations, become more, over eons, become more hospitable for one type of ant that tends to hate leafcutter ants. Then, when a bunch of leafcutter ants happens upon you, these ants are going to pour out of the stem and start just kicking ass all over the place. And they act as kind of an active defense system. So exactly right. Why do the ants want to live in this tree? Anybody have any guesses? Why do the ants live inside the tree instead of just in the ground or hovering in the air?
Better protection and protection.
Both. So these trees have actually involved these things called Mullerian bodies, which in all of the tree, like its stems, it's got little armpits, and its little armpits grow these little fruits. And they're not actually fruits because they don't have seeds or anything. It's not for reproduction at all. It's simply to provide extra food for the ants to come eat. And so the ants can actually just like pretty much sustain most of their life just off like, hey, I live inside this tree. Oh, we got some little food bodies for me. I grab those, we eat them. We're fat and happy. Except when those leafcutter ants come, or if there's a jerk sloth trying to walk up me. Yeah. So, but anyway, you learn about these like symbioses and act as if like they're a very special thing. But really they're more so the norm. There just happens to be ones where we can see direct linkages between them a lot more easily than we can other things. But the fact is, animals, humans, and plants, and the inorganic world are all very symbiotically entwined all the time. So cool. That's another one for looking out in the field. Let's do one more for in the lab. It's a good thing about playing stuff in the lab.
Might it be that like tools and supplies are easy access?
Good point. So, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are super cool when we deal with animals that are very hard to carry into the field. You'll notice it's until very recently that people made these nice little programmers that we can actually program. You know, I would say in the past 20 years, we've just now kind of had this ability for cheap DIY people to program their own flashing bulb to carry with them in the field. Before that, you may have had to sit down with a larger computer if you wanted to program very complex specific behaviors for a flashing light. And you would be sitting in a big lab somewhere, and you'd want to bring your animals to where your giant computer and your power supply is. And that's a very good point, too. And that's going to be something that we're going to be investigating and researching as a class, is not only just interactions with animals, but what kinds of methods and materials can we develop to be able to bring some of these abilities that we have in the lab out into the field, now that we have smaller batteries and smaller microcontrollers, things like that. Perfect. Okay, so you guys are all pretty much getting done with the soldering. You're all super quick. Have you tested your circuits? Most of you probably have. You will learn. Katie is some sort of genius over here. She knows the ins and outs of amazing devices. The next thing that you're going to need to do is you guys need to figure out how to make a mouthpiece. So your programmer takes one input and has one output. The output's what? What's the output? The light, exactly. So we're outputting photons into the environment due to a behavior that we programmed. The input is going to be some sort of mouth input. Why a mouth input? One reason, it makes you shut up. So whenever we were playing this kind of hide and go seek game, we were just walking around like, oh, so what'd you do today? Stuff like that. And that kind of takes away from your experience of like, I'm a lightning bug running around. So we're going good. And it scripts the interactor. You guys use this terminology in your Janet Murray classes and the readings, right? So it scripts the interactor into behaving a somewhat different way. The second thing is, if you're running around in the woods or the jungle, you want your hands to be able to push branches and stuff out of the way. I guess you shouldn't be teaching for any reason. You're getting taught by a firefly, so it's effectively easy, possibly. Third thing is, this is possibly an interface that could be used by a non-human. So if we have like, okay, just text, 855 flash to my Arduino whenever I want my butt to shine. We could do that, but it would be harder to get Maddie to do something like that. Whereas if we make some sort of simple circuit that all we do is close a connection, then potentially someone even like Maddie could be able to use such a thing. So what I did before was, the way that this input works is a simple binary input. You have two wires. One wire goes to your mouth, right? The other wire, and this used to be connected until we all saw me cut it in half last week in class on accident. The other side of this connection goes to the ground. So what this does is on this pin is normally sitting, you are a pin, right? Our pin was normally sitting high, and then where's our connection? This is going to be one side of the mouthpiece. So he's a wire on one side of the mouthpiece. You're the other side of the mouthpiece.
Okay.
She's the wire on the other side, so they're not touching yet. And now I need you to be ground. So you're ground down here. Okay? You're touching this. Okay. So now, when Andy bites this mouthpiece, we make a connection here. This brings everyone down to ground. All the electricity gets sucked down to ground. So at our sensor over here at this pin, we notice it's now reading at a low voltage, and we can then trigger the light to go off. And so when this mouthpiece is open, it goes back up because of how we programmed the sensor. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But that's basically what we're making here. So it's just two wires. When you touch the wires, it makes a connection from mouth to ground. And because I don't have any more of these little plastic bits, you guys are going to brainstorm about how you want to make these. So get into groups of two once you're finished with your soldering and everything, and start thinking about how you're going to make your mouthpiece. Bonuses. I'm going to let everybody think about them for a couple minutes without me kind of adding stuff, and then I'll answer more questions and discuss it. So think about, if you've thought of one idea, think about maybe 2 or 3 more. Do some quick prototyping.
I just need one more because she doesn't.
Or, so we're brainstorming. We can.
Would it be dangerous to make
Yay.
Alright.
Thank you, Party.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know that.
There's one rule with your tongue. Don't stick your tongue on the soldering iron. So as long as that's not part of your design, it's not fun. You've licked batteries before, right?
Yeah.
So you have no fear of the electricity. Right?
Just some plastic or something.
Plastic.
Yeah.
I'm letting you guys discuss. Think of a couple different ways for connecting your things.
Tape and tape.
You all have multimeters. You all have multimeters, right?
Yeah.
A quick way to test if your design is working would be simply, like if you had this sort of thing. hook two wires, however you want your design to work, and then hook this thing to the side. And when you bite it, it should go beep, right? Because that's how it works. So test that out. You have 3 more minutes. And you have no partner, so I'll be your partner. What do you think we should do?
I'm trying to think of objects that already exist that you're supposed to do this motion with. Like a kazoo, you'll have to make you like bite down and everything. I feel like they're like dentist things that are really good for kids, or like mouth blocks. But what do you think?
I'm just a little old country boy. I don't know about these fandangled cybiotic interfaces. But I think one thing we gotta think about is our mouth is very wet.
Found it in my box.
So we gotta make sure whatever we use doesn't get too soggy, or else it'll all fall apart.
Right. So cardboard out, plastic out.
You know, what's wrong with popsicle sticks?
I don't know, when I have a popsicle and the popsicle was ice, I don't know. That didn't seem too good, but maybe.
So we have a popsicle stick. The downside to things getting wet, like cardboard, is that they'll just deteriorate and they fall apart in your mouth, right? But popsicle stick, it's made to get wet. It's retain its structure. That's not a bad idea. Yeah, dig it.
And it's cheap. It's nice.
That's true, that's true.
So you put electrical tape, like, if anything, I wouldn't want to cover something up and chew electrical tape, but if anything, if there is a shape that we want, we could just cover it with something that we would want.
So you have waterproof.
Cover it.
That's not a bad idea.
They're like glazes that are safe, non-toxic, I'm sure.
Ooh. You mean like a ceramic glaze?
No, I mean more like, even though that'd be cool if that would work. What do you call it? Like gesso kind of thing?
Oh, like you pour at bars sometimes you'll see they have like
Yeah.
layers and layers of that goop that they put on the table from people like scratching into it and stuff like that. Yeah, it could maybe work. It might be overkill for this project. I forgot one other thing. So we have 2 more things left to add onto our circuit, right? We have a mouthpiece, and we also have the LED butt piece. Let's keep thinking about how we're going to make and design the mouthpiece while we all solder on our butt piece. So does everybody still have their green LED that we handed out in last class?
Actually, I got a new one. I was experimenting with mine and it broke.
Oh, really? What'd you do? How'd you break it?
Plugged it into the 5 volts and the 12 volts at the same time.
Oh, interesting. Huh. In general, so your LEDs, they are a very efficient circuit and will try to take as much electricity as you can give them. They have very little internal resistance, which is kind of bad if you're powering things with anything much higher than just like our little battery here, because it'll actually take in so much electricity that it'll burn out the LED. And that may be probably what happened to Eric's LED. So in general, with your LEDs, you're going to want to follow a much better practice than you see me do with our projects. You're going to want to put a resistor somewhere in between them. But because we're using such little electricity, and there's some internal resistance in our weird copper tape stuff, we're going to be able to just use just our 3 volts battery, and things will be okay. We'll light it for a while. So we try to hunt you down another thing like that. We also need wire. Wire. Oh, perfect. So, we have a big box of wire over here. You're going to need your partner. So, or no, I guess you can just measure yourself. You're going to attach the firefly thing to like your chest, and then you just want your light up thing to be around your belly button. So measure off a little length of this wire. This is, everybody remember what this wire is called? It's very thin. I just barely mentioned last time. It's called wire wrapping the wire. It's wire that you actually wrap around other things. Like you want to make an electromagnet, you wrap this wire around it. I use it because it's very thin, and you can, it's easy to work and bend with, nice to use. So you're going to take a chunk of this, grab one of these wire cutters over here, snip off one piece, use the very thinnest thing on these wire strippers, and then strip off the leads. So now you have a bare lead up there. You're going to do that to both ends. Solder one side to your thing labeled butt, right? And the other side to where most of our components end up going.
Ground.
Exactly. Perfect. So one side of your LED is going to go to ground, one side is going to go to butt strip. That's right down in the middle of your Firefly. And there you go. Here's some wire.
So here? Oh.
I am slightly confused.
Sure.
Wait,
You're
I
all
want blue.
This is brown.
So I don't think those are in the light bulb,
That
they're
is
in
one
the
and
two
you're
pieces.
one and two.
Yeah. So let's test that UV LED.
Like that?
Cool. So,
Yeah.
Um,
Something like that. Well, it's
we
not
try this. Boom, that works. So this pin down here that says butt on your
oh.
schematic, it's the
Gotcha.
output. It says butt and then a B at the end, so I guess it's a typo. That's where the positive, we're going to make that positive inside our code.
Okay.
And so we'll be able to turn this LED on with that. So one goes there, one goes to the ground.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And Mr. Hands is helpful for soldering wire to an LED.
This one's butt.
So we solder it like.
You still need an extra LED,
These
right?
and one's like there.
Hey.
Righto, thank you.
No problem.
Hey!
So,
What'd you use?
double check the line. So this is here and here.
Yes.
I'm so confused as to how they're doing this right.
Yes.
Yay!
And you don't even have to worry about the problem that I had with my design, where trying to actually solder on the plastic and
Yeah.
melting through the plastic.
So,
is
Oh.
bad.
yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah,
Do
exactly.
we have any tape in this question?
You're all going to learn. There's lots of other classes where they'll teach you electronics, where they'll teach you programming, or you take a biology class and they'll teach you walking around in the woods. Tape? Yeah, I think each of these comes with electrical tape. I was twirling it around in someone's bench.
Are you?
Can I get
But this class is going to expose you to all of the problems that you get from every other
I'll
class.
get the exact
So no matter what you do, there's going to be a zillion other problems that always come up.
Yeah, that's plenty. I'm just gonna look
Perfect. Nice. And so it looks like you're stripping pretty good. Show me how you're stripping.
Are you covering this?
Teach me. Okay, so
I'm not covering this.
Yep.
I'm not covering it.
I'm just gonna.
Pinch it.
Okay, I'm putting the cardboard inside.
So what a lot of people do is they tend
Are you
to,
using both?
while they're stripping it,
I use one for
they
this.
tend to want to like pull this way or like that. But really, you just pull directly out. It slides off super easy.
Are you using the cardboard to?
One thing to notice is
But-
you'll probably want your leads
Yeah.
to be shorter because you're just going to solder it on here. If this is out like poking around, it might bump short or something like that. So really, like that's all you need.
Oh,
And
okay.
then you just stick it on there, make a nice little ball of solder. You got it.
I have.
You're in luck.
Where's the?
Oh yeah, and thanks.
No problem.
So we need to cut 2 pieces of wire.
You will need 2 pieces of wire.
Now you can see it go.
I just like where it
Shoot, where'd it go?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You guys are great.
Is that L-E-E-D-S, L-E-A-D-S?
It's like LEADS, like you're leading the electricity somewhere, not like the city in Britain.
You got it.
You might want.
Okay,
Okay, I did a thing.
so
You did that thing.
I did a
what
thing.
were
How
we
was your
soldering?
thing?
Can we see this thing?
Oh, your thing is great.
You
It's
get
wonderful.
this.
I don't
Okay.
remember what Mary left me
Just
here.
sniff that off. That's
I
not
actually
your
like your
LED.
design a
Thank
lot
you.
more than my design, so I'm really sad.
It's the same design.
You guys can
No,
share
but-
design.
It's the same thing.
But proportion-wise and the way that
Yeah.
you execute your tape onto it, it looks nice.
I still believe that mine is the most ghetto.
The most what?
The most ghetto.
Alright,
So,
so you put it on here.
So while you're finishing up here, I'm going to tell you guys what your assignments are for next week. So next week is going to be the last week you're going to see me until I go to Switzerland for a week for Ubiquitous Computing Conference. So next week we're jam-packed full of all kinds of stuff. I bumped the due date for your assignment back from next Tuesday to instead Wednesday night for the Fireflies. What you're going to want to do is Tuesday during the day, we're going to finish up the soldering and the programming. If you can have these as finished up as you can before then. You all have access to this room, I'm pretty sure. So if you need to solder in something extra after class or something breaks, pop on here. You know how to access and arm your battle stations, go for it. So basically try to have your mouthpiece and your LEDs all together on your things. We'll try to debug them on Tuesday. I'll also show you how to program with the AT-Tiny controllers, because there's a couple things you have to do before you can actually get it up and running exactly how you want it. So that's what we're going to be doing in class on Tuesday. On Thursday, we're going to spend class not here, but in the rapid prototyping room. Do you guys know where that is? Exactly. It is in TSRB. So what we're going to do is on Thursday, and I'll remind you this again on Tuesday, we're not going to meet here. We're instead going to go to TSRB. Does everybody know where TSRB is?
Yeah.
I'm not pretty sure how to get in there. And you just
we'll
show
meet-
them their bus card.
Yeah, you just show them your bus card. Or a credit card if you're on your bus, or just walk by.
Or, yeah, I used to get
Or
fold up and with gold colored
Nebraska?
card. And
No,
they're like,
no, you
okay.
guys can.
Yeah.
Oh,
But so what we're gonna do is we're gonna meet in the lobby right there. So you just walk right there, and I'll be hanging out there. Everyone will meet there. I'm gonna take you down to this lab and show you how to use things like the laser cutter to cut apart things that you may need. Because we're gonna be dealing with lots of materials, as you can see. We get lots of material practice, and soon we'll be able to make lasers cut our materials. It'll be cool.
The wire?
Yeah.
That I can find right here? Oh, the wire?
Could be then. I'll grab you one.
oh, thank you.
Larry, I need your assistance again. So what is what connected it to?
Larry, mine.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody say Larry.
I don't know that.
Hold it tight.
The button. Does it matter how long?
You just took the
This is
wire.
really long now. So you cut it normal. They have two hundred pliers. Yeah, airtight pliers. And then you take the smallest one and you strip it up. There's like a little hole in there.
Oh,
You got lots and
Well,
lots.
how are you?
What I would do, do we have some in like our
We only have like 10 minutes.
station? Well.
Can we look at cake here and we do
What?
the fireworks one?
About solder 2 wires.
Okay, there you go. I think that is broke, but now it's not.
Sweet, yes.
Come on, Mr. Haynes.
Dad,
Your hand's not moved.
hello. Hello.
Hey.
The thing.
Okay. Two other items for your homework. Does everybody remember what homework number 1 was?
Hey.
Reading?
Well, I didn't even tell you what the reading was. It was finish up your Firefly things as best as you can for Tuesday.
Oh.
Okay? So homework number 1, finish up your Firefly things as best as you
Figure out how to
can.
make them out. We did our phone.
Number 2, there's another reading online for you guys to go through. It's a pretty simple reading. It's by Buxton. Look at the name Buxton. It's about orange juicers. So it's not too hard of a read. So don't fear it. It's about designing user experiences, and then also into different ways of sketching designs of experiences and interactions.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, everybody got that? What's homework number 1?
Finish off your.
See the, yeah, you need
Cool.
to read.
What's homework number 2?
Yeah.
Read Buxton's homework 2, yes. I'm going down the bullet points here. Okay, homework 3. Here's the weirdest one. Everybody ready for this? You're going to do your first of a series of informal bio-performances that you're going to do. Did anybody read about these in the syllabus? And list what these are in the syllabus? Anybody remember? Well, that's good, because I'm going to tell you about them anyway. So, there's going to be an email that comes out right after this class ends that gives more details on this. But you're also charged with this weekend. You're going to go out into the natural world. You're going to find a non-human creature. Come here, Maddie. So I'm out walking around in the woods, and I stumble across this giant, crazy squirrel. What you have to do for the bio performance is this. Spend a minimum of 10 minutes playing and interacting with this non-human creature. So maybe if it's fish, I'll like toss pieces of bread or different pieces of bread. Do as many different things as you can with the thing in 10 minutes. Then you're going to sit down out with your journal, it's a very handy thing to have out there, and you're going to write down a performance. You're going to come up with a very simple performance. And so it could be something like this. If I have a bunch of fish floating here, I'm going to say, every 30 seconds, I will drop a piece of bread into the water. Then every piece of bread after that, I will drop in the water maybe, 1 inch next to it. So you're going to come up with some sort of performance where you do something in the environment with your animal. And you just kind of program yourself like a very simple robot, okay? It could be, I'm just going to, every time Maddie brings me a ball, I'm going to throw it back in a certain direction. You can make it more complicated if you want. You can say like, I'm going to rotate 10 degrees and then throw it every time Maddie comes back to the ball. You can try to incorporate some feedback from the animal in your response. Like, if a blue fish grabs the bread, I'm going to drop the next piece of bread to the right. Or if a green fish grabs the bread, I'm going to drop it to the left. Anyway, come up with a simple script for yourself. Then spend another 5-10 minutes enacting your script. You might get really bored. You might get really tired. It's going to be kind of maybe an endurance thing. You're just going to have to do it, okay? So all that together takes about 20 minutes of you walking around in the woods, having fun with some sort of animal. Could be in the park, wherever. The final thing you need to do is document what happened in your whole performance. This time we're going to do purely analog documentation. All of your documentation is going to be in the forms of writings that you do in your journal, and this can take the place of one of your journal entries for next week. You're going to write about what you're doing with your creature, and maybe draw some pictures, or however you want to express how the interactions went, okay? And so that documentation shouldn't take more than like 20 minutes or something. So a pretty simple exercise to help get you guys out and in the world over this gorgeous weekend. Because you're going to have like a 3-day weekend too, right?
Yeah.
Not that it matters for this class, Tuesday, Thursday, hits you no matter what. Weekends will never affect you.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's Labor Day weekend. You have no Monday. Cool.
Gosh. Okay, making sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's tracking God. It's also driving to Asia. So everybody kind of got the homework?
Question.
Are you? Yeah.
How did the homework go?
I will
Fine.
email. Huh?
Sure.
Sure.
So,
Oh, me neither. We were always looking at demonstrations. Or just
No.
kind of like
This goes to your LED.
making the wires right now.
So that goes to the positive side of your LED.
We'll
The negative
figure out
side
how
of your LED.
it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
okay.
Just right now.
But this has to be done by Tuesday?
No, as done as it can be. Yeah, it needs to be done by Wednesday.
Thursday.
So we just bring these in on Wednesday?
Alright.
Well, we're gonna come on Tuesday.
I think we're all confused and want to know what the next step is after the first one.
Okay, so you have your, okay, so you want to make your LED light up, right? The whole point of the butt panel is to go to the positive side of your LED. This is going to, you're going to need to snip this in half. One side is going to go to your LED, then the negative pin of your LED is going to go to the ground. So then we're going to program our little chip to say, whenever I bite my thing, tell pin 0, which is your butt pin, to go high, and it'll make our LED turn on. Okay? So that's what happens here. Your mouth is going to be a similar thing, where you go from the mouth to one end of your little closing device, and then the other end goes to ground too. Everybody got that? If there's questions, email me. Come to, oh, I guess I don't have any office hours left this week. Just email me. I'll be glad to answer any questions. So, try to finish that up. Okay, we need to clean up and get out of here.
Hey, how in our environment does our thing have to be, our performance? Like, I have a thing with corals and stuff, and they move. Can I cook them?
Corals?
Yeah. They do move.
Oh, you have like an aquarium?
Yeah, they get mad at you.
We'll save that for a rainy day later when it gets colder.
Because I have 3, and some of them have
That's cool.
2-foot fish, and some of them have fishes big.
That live in the coral?
The clowns do. The other ones
Cool.
do.
That might even an awesome aquarium. But yeah, for this one, actually go out in an outdoor space.
Well, I was gonna take.
If you can carry all of your fish in your aquarium outside and then play with it outside,
Am
we'll
I
let it slide.
still in here?
Okay, we'll try not to kill them.
Yeah.
Yeah, just toss it. What do we do? The hot solder knives, leave them on top of your little desk thing. Yeah. Those didn't come with heads, did they? Like little lids. No. That's okay. We're gonna design some. Everybody watch your hands shoving them into the bowels of your desks. The gaping maw, how about that?
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
We need just a little bit of extra wire wrapping wire. Here's some blue.
Oh, I know that.
Okay, perfect. This is yours.
Thank you.
Cool. Some more wire wrapping wire? It's on her table.
Okay, then I think it's mine, because I can't remember if I left mine over there.
Remember, you guys should all have 24-hour access to everything in here.
I still don't have.
You don't have access?
No.
Okay. You need to email. I'll email. Oh, sorry. I'll email you the person that you're supposed to email.
Okay, thank you. And then.
And if I don't
Yeah,
remind
mom
me-
now?
Yeah, it's a Sam Lab 318.
Nice sweet.
Wait, Eric, where is it?
It was in the back of the room, yes. The other day.
You check my box, I think I have to.
I had yours.
Uh-oh.
There are 2 in there.
There are?
Goodbye, Conrad. Oh, he's so cute.
Hey, do we have a trash can? I didn't.
You know, I'm looking. Yeah, because I'm
I
trying
think
to.
they took it out of here.
Let's go steal our trash can back.
Wait a minute. Hey, Larry.
Do you guys, does you guys belong to us?
We're putting away.
The black stuff?
I like those here. Or like, they come with the thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, trash can right up there.
There's a trash can right outside the door. Yeah, perfect.